The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. I am thrilled to be here with you on this Thursday in mid-July, and we're going to be talking about autism from a 360-degree perspective for the next 2 hours live here with you. We have a lot of information to cover today, and some of it is deeply troubling and saddening. And of course, if you've been following the news, you know I'm talking about the 11-year-old who went missing in Riverside County, and we're going to be giving you the sad update today. I know most of you have been following this story on Facebook or in the news, and you know that a body was found yesterday, and it's presumed to be the body of the 11-year-old, known to his friends as Juju. And, you know, the case has taken a wild turn. We're going to talk a little bit more about that and about some of the information that's filtering out that disturbing at best, and some of the ways that people have chosen to spoke out, which you know, in the middle of all this tragedy, there are people who are making it worse. So we're going to talk a little bit about that later on in the show. But we're also going to be talking about a wide variety of other topics, answering some of your questions. In particular, in the second hour, Angela Persicke is going to be here with us. She's a BCBA, a board-certified behavior analyst, and she's going to be talking with us about speech therapy. Many of you have written in, two people in particular have written in and said, I'm just a little confused about this. You guys talk about ABA, and if I'm getting ABA, do I need speech therapy? And is speech therapy that the school is offering or speech therapy that I could do through a private provider, is that something that's worthwhile for a child on the autism spectrum? And is it worthwhile for kids who are nonverbal? So we're going to try to answer those questions for you in the second hour with an expert in the field of autism. A lot of other stuff happening though this morning, and we're talking about we've been promising you that we're going to get somebody in to explain some of the legislative things that are going on here in California. I don't know about you, but yesterday I spent some time watching recently, in fact it was on July 1st of this year, the California state legislature held a conference, symposium. I don't know what they call that politically. I'm not a political animal, except when I have to be, right? And their mental health, the group of people, I don't know what the political word is, the group of people who talk about mental health were allowing for people to talk, and they had Patrick Kennedy in as a speaker along with Senator Darrell Steinberg, who we talk about this show all the time, Senator Darrell Steinberg, who has been a real champion for mental health and for autism. I'm not sure, we've been trying to get a response to some of the latest things that he's done, and we're getting radio silence here, which may be because he's busy trying to fix it. I don't know. I'd like to think so. But in any case, had an opportunity to hear Patrick Kennedy speak, and I just thought that he was incredibly witty, knowledgeable, sensitive, open, honest, talked about the need for, after all these years of research, that we're not recognizing that the brain is a part of the body. The people don't recognize that as a medical necessity to take care of the brain and all of the different things that the brain do. And he said, hundreds of years of research, and we're just now trying to convince people in the medical field that the brain is a part of the body. And even disclosed, and I think he's been very public about this before, that he himself has had mental issues, including addiction. And I just found him very refreshing. And you can find that there's videotape of both Patrick Kennedy and Senator Darrell Steinberg talking about that with the California State Senate. But we're going to have Julie Kornack with us a little bit later on. She is a policy expert, and she's going to help us to break it down, because I know as I have asked people in different areas about what is happening with the new regional center things that are happening in California, everybody seems a little confused. So I'm hoping that Julie can shed some light on that. And even to the point, and the reason why this is important to all of us, and this is why I brought up Patrick Kennedy, was that he kept driving home the point. He said, I'm here in California talking to you because California is, a huge state, and it has a huge influence. We tend to be forward thinking here in California, and what happens in California, so goes the rest of the country. We say that all the time, and California is a little bit mired in the poo right now, and not Winnie the Pooh, the other Pooh. So hopefully Julie's going to shed some light on that, and we're also going to be taking your questions. So lots for us to talk about. I want to remind you that the whole show is meant to be interactive. Emily's going to show you some of the different ways that you can participate with us. Write in and say your thoughts. And I will tell you, too, that if you're as sickened by this 11-year-old story as the rest of us are, and you want to get something off your chest, write in and tell us. Let it be a forum for everything that you've got going on, right? So there, Emily's showing you the different ways. I'm going to remind you that the only place to watch us live is www.autism-live.com. When you go there, you'll see a box. It's there, and you can type away, hit enter. By the way, it's free. You do not have to register. We're not looking for your credit card. We don't even take your personal information. I don't know your name or where you're writing from when you write. So it's good to tell us where you're writing from. And if you want us to get back to you with some information, you will need to tell us, because otherwise I have no way of getting back to you. I have a way that I can edit that out before I show it to the rest of the audience. So participate in whatever way is useful to you. And I would also ask you to share. We always refer to ourselves as the little show that could, that we think can, and that has been. We've been around for a year now, and our audience has grown. But if you like what you're hearing here, then I encourage you to tell other people, let them know. And when they have questions, that they can get at least information here. That's really why we're here. I always remind you, I'm not an expert in autism. I'm a mom, and I've been on this journey, and so I have a real emotional affinity with wherever you are. If you're a person on the spectrum, or if you have a child on the spectrum, or if you're a teacher who wants to be a better teacher for your students who are on the spectrum, I have nothing but praise and I want to help you on your journey. That's why I'm here, because I got help. Otherwise, my child wouldn't be doing as well as he is. And he is doing well. I have no wood to knock on anymore. I'll knock on the head. But my kid got help, and he got help at a really crucial time. And I get it, that's why my life is as good as it is right now. And I credit it with luck. Because it wasn't that I did something that made that happen. It was really luck, and I want to help you to be lucky too. So we talk about whatever you want to talk about, and we take your suggestions, and hopefully we move towards that progress, because progress is the name of the game. And I want you to know that progress is available for all of our kids, no matter what age we're talking about, no matter what skill level, no matter what deficit level we're talking about. There is progress that's available. It's going to look different for all of our kids, because they all start at a different place, just like we all started at a different place. But hope and progress are essential, right? We cling together. We can do this together, right? I always say, si se puede. We can do this. Okay, we like to start every morning with something we fondly refer to as the jargon of the day. Yes, the jargon du jour. This is when we step a little into crazy land. Sometimes we step into alphabet land, as I call it. And we try to make sense of those words, phrases, and acronyms that the world of autism seems to be mired in. And if you find the jargon frustrating, I so appreciate you, because I still do from time to time. Even all these years later, sometimes I'll be in a meeting with somebody and my eyes just glaze over and I go, they're doing it again. I have no idea what you're talking about. But it doesn't happen as much, because I did eventually start to make friends with the jargon. And once you do, you go, okay, it's much easier. But you have to do it a little bit at a time so that you don't get further overwhelmed. None of us needs to be any more overwhelmed than we already are, do we? I don't. I don't need to be more overwhelmed than I am. because it really takes very little for me to be overwhelmed, and jargon is a lot. All right, so we give you the one term, and we give you the actual definition. Sometimes we make fun of it, and then we give you a working definition that hopefully kind of makes sense with where you are in life, and you go, oh, okay, that's why I want this. That's why I want to know about this, and that's why I want this thing in my life, and now I know what to ask for. And that's certainly one of the term that we're going to use today is certainly something you want to be asking for in your life and in any life of a person who has autism. Okay, our term today is generalization. This is one of those confusing terms because this is a term that we use in our everyday life. Someone says, oh, well, that's a sweeping generalization that you just made, right? But that's not what we're talking about. Let's take a look at our actual definition here. The occurrence of a relevant behavior under different non-training conditions, i.e. across subjects, settings, people, behaviors, and or time, without the scheduling of the same events in those conditions. Yes, and this is why we have to break it down and give you a working definition, because what in the hey 99 does that mean? I don't know. No one knows. All right. But generalization is one of the most important things we need to understand with autism. So let's toss out this definition and take a look at our working definition. Being able to apply what has been learned in new ways or situations that were never taught. So stop and think about this child that you have, or a teenager, or an adult, and you want to teach them something new. And it might be a very basic concept, or it might be something really difficult. I always go back to when my mom was going to teach me how to drive, and my mother and my father talked about it, and my father said, you're going to have to teach her, because we knew it was going to be not easy. My mother couldn't possibly teach me every single instance that was going to come up in driving. Think about our kids. Can we possibly teach them every single instance in which they need to be safe? Last night, we were walking into a parking lot, and there was a car that had backed up, right? And we needed to walk through to get to our car, but somebody else was doing something, so the car couldn't move forward. And my child made the choice. The car was still in reverse because she was waiting for somebody, and she hadn't bothered to put it in drive. So he walked between the car that was parked and the car that was pulling out, and he walked behind them. And I went, because my fear was, and it was like a teenager who was driving the car, and I thought, she doesn't know she's in reverse, and she's going to gun it, and she's going to pin my kid behind the car. And so, my son heard me make the noise, and he said, what? I was watching. I knew where the car was, and the car was stopped. Why are you? And I said, but she was in reverse. Her white lights were on, and she was in reverse, and sometimes people make mistakes. That's why you don't walk behind cars that are running. And he said, oh. And that had never come up before. Am I ever going to be able to teach him every single circumstance for safety? No, because you couldn't possibly. So we teach basic rules about safety, and we plan for generalization. Generalization is when they automatically can put information that they have already and put it together in a new circumstance that's never been taught and apply the skills that they've learned. And this can be something really small, or it could be something broad and sweeping like safety. So when you have a child and you're teaching them the concept of red, and you start out with a red block, a two-dimensional piece of paper with a red square on it, and then you go to a red block, and you go to a red bird. But then how many different shades of red are there? And you want for the child to be able to see red everywhere and understand the concept of red in every single circumstance that it's going to come up in their life. But you can't possibly teach it. So you teach it in all those different, you teach it two-dimensionally, you teach it three-dimensionally, and you teach it in different formats and in different shades, because eventually the child is going to see a shade of red that they never were taught, and they're going to get it that it's red. Generalization, right? And if you teach all the rules of safety, that at some point your child is going to react in a situation that they've never been in before, and they're going to react by putting together all the different rules and the knowledge that they know and behave safely. Generalization. For my mom, she couldn't teach me every single thing that was going to happen within a car, so she taught me a bunch of rules, and she had me drive a bunch of different cars, because she didn't want me just to learn how to drive one car on one road in one state. She wanted me to be able to drive everywhere. If I could, drive to Europe, right? You can't, but if you could. So she taught me how to drive in our old car, and then she taught me how to drive in my dad's car, and then she put me on my sister's car, and then she borrowed my neighbor's car, and then she taught me how to drive a stick. I never really got that. I had a stick for a while, but it wasn't good. But in any case, and she taught me all different kinds of rules of the road so that when things happened, I would have an arsenal of things to draw from. But eventually, I generalized the skill of driving. I now can drive. You can put me in almost anything, and I can drive it because she planned for generalization. She didn't even know she was doing it, but that's what she was doing. So whenever we start teaching something, we have to plan first before we start even teaching it. It's not an afterthought generalization. We have to plan from minute one, in fact, pre-minute one, right? When you go to start to teach something, you have to think of the end goal, which is that I want the child to be able to get this concept in all circumstances, with all people, at all times of the day, in all settings, in any possible way that it can show up. So how am I going to do that? Now, you might think to yourself, geez, that's just too much for me to worry about. I can't do it. This is where we get into problems with autism if we don't plan for generalization from minute one. You might be somebody who's out there who potty trains your child, and you did the potty camp at home, and you got the child potty trained, and it was like, whew, I got the child potty trained. And now you're 6 months down the road and you realize, oh, when I go to the store, it's a disaster. My child can't poop in the store bathroom. I know adults who can't have a bowel movement outside of their house, right? Because they're not comfortable with it, because at some point in the process, I know it's TMI, right? But at some point in the process of potty training, they didn't generalize, so they can't relax and do it in different places. Or the child that, keeps having accidents at school because, there's some trepidation about going to the bathroom someplace else. But for families that plan for generalization with potty training from day one, -1, the day before you start, so they get the potty training under control in the downstairs bathroom, and then they go to the upstairs bathroom, and then they go to Aunt Betty's house, and then they go to Grandma's house, and then they go in the Target bathroom. And those kids get potty training, and they generalize it, and they can go to the bathroom on a plane. Right? Which is sometimes necessary. So generalization is key, and it's not just with some lessons, it's with all lessons. So when you're talking to your ABA provider, you want to hear the word generalization come up a lot. When you're talking in the school setting and they say, oh, well, we've taught Joey how to do multiplication, but he has to go to the resource room to do it. You want to be asking, how are we planning for generalization? Because Joey can't just do multiplication in the resource room. How are we going to get it so that Joey can do multiplication with all the stimuli of the other kids around? Generalization is key. It's the true success. It's when the kid has the skill no matter what, no matter where. I always think of My Fair Lady when they say, by George, I think she's got it. That's what we want for our kids. When they get it, when the skill is their own and they can do it no matter what, no matter where, no matter when. Generalization. So you see how important it is. It's key, absolutely key. Okay, I've taken too much time on that. We're going to move on to our question of the day that we always pose to you. Our question today for you that you can answer on Facebook: what skill has your child been able to apply to new situations with success? We're basically asking you, what has your child been able to generalize? And, these are the moments that parents love to brag about. So I'm asking you to brag. Go on Facebook. Let other parents know, because parents need to know that this does happen. You teach a skill, you massage it, you take it out, you try to give it legs, and then at some point it jumps the shark, right? It goes, and your child is able to do that. I'm very fond of telling the story of, we were working so hard to get my child to be verbal and to become a vocabulary sponge where he would just take on new words that we didn't teach him. We all want that for our kids, right? And the first time my son demonstrated that skill was with a really inappropriate swear word. Now, I was mortified because clearly he got the word from someone I can't even imagine. But I was thrilled because he was gaining words that had never been taught to him. He was picking up words like a sponge. It was a great, great sign. So we ask you, what skills has your child been able to apply to new situations? Now, I mean, I couldn't even begin to list all the things that my son has generalized. It would take me 3 weeks of sitting here endlessly listing off all the new skills that he has been able to apply to situations with success. But these are the moments that we all go, woohoo, you know? So share so that other people see that it does happen. Because if you're in those early stages where you're just starting to teach things, you go, really? Is this all going to work out? It does. It's lovely. It's brilliant. Okay, we always have a topic of the week for you. And our topic this week, we're in two camps here. We're doing success in the classroom because it is that time of the year when we want to be talking about success in the classroom. But I've also asked our experts to be talking with us about cognition and what we can do to successfully gain cognition skills over the summer, because that's going to help us to be successful in the classroom as well. So I just want to let you clear that up. We're working on both those things this week. And as I mentioned before, some of the stuff that we're going to talk about today, Julie Kornack is going to be joining us in just a little while. She's a policy analyst. She's going to tell us, shed some light for us. I need it. I need an understanding of what is happening here in the California legislature about autism. It's like the best of times, worst of times, and I need somebody to sort it out for me. So Julie's going to be with us. She is a policy analyst and an expert. We do have a news update. We talked about it just a few minutes ago. We're going to talk about it some more because I'm really upset with the way some of the people are making comments about this case, and I'll make that clear in just a minute. And then during the second hour, we have Breaking It Down with Angela. BCBA Angela Persicke will be with us. She is going to be answering a bunch of questions that you guys have sent in, but in particular, I've asked her to answer the question about, is speech therapy something that our kids on the autism spectrum need in addition to ABA? And if they're nonverbal, is speech therapy something that is truly beneficial? Because we're all running around to get to that OT appointment and get to that speech appointment and get home in time to do ABA. Is it really worth it? You guys have asked. She's going to answer that in the second hour. All right. This and ever so much more. We're going to take a break and come back to cover this horrifying update in the case of the 11-year-old who went missing on Saturday night in Riverside County. Stick with us.
You say howdy, we say hi. Let's get rowdy, let's get wild. Let's get wild. Let's get wild. Let's get wild.
Hi, welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Lisa Ackerman, Executive Director of TACA. We're gonna bake again.
All right.
It's my lovely assistant.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Lucero.
We heard so many people go, I want a decent chocolate chip cookie for my kid to eat. We've got all our dry ingredients. So I've got the flour, I've got the flaxseed meal, baking soda, baking powder, gar gum, or xanthan gum.
Great.
So we're gonna get started in the mixer here. So those are dry ingredients. I did have brown sugar. We did cut this down. And the one way to do that is my favorite, and that's maple syrup. I'm using egg for this recipe, but we could use more arrowroot and also the flaxseed meal. So I'll go ahead and throw my eggs in here, which I love doing. So, and then the last thing is a shortening and gluten-free casein-free butter replacement. So I'm gonna go ahead and throw this in. I've let it sit out for a while so it's nice and soft. So let's go ahead and mix this thing well. These are dairy-free, soy-free, and I really like them. Again, Enjoy Life is a great product. It's also net-free. And chocolate chips are a personal thing. I won't judge you if you use the whole bag.
I would.
I know, right? So here we go. Great recipe. It's the nice consistency. Everything's ready to go, so we can enjoy our cookies here in just about 10 minutes. We want to give it a kind of like a couple inches between each cookie. Now, a lot of people are really concerned about aluminum, so what I've done is I laid down my natural brown parchment paper, and Jen's helping out putting the cookies down. So we're separating the nice baked good that's all organic from the aluminum cookie sheets. So let's go put these
Great.
in. So magic oven allows me to pull the last ones out. And voila.
Yum, looks good.
Really great cookies. I'll let you have a bite so you can do my Vanna White there too. Yeah, these taste pretty
Good.
good.
Really good.
We're going to come back later after I gain 5 pounds and eat this entire tray.
For sure.
You know, more feedback is good. So if there's something you want us to convert, like another recipe or maybe a relative made, just let us know. autismlive@gmail.com. You can go to Facebook, or there's thousands of recipes on the TACA website just waiting for you to explore. You can go to TACANOW, TACANOW.org, and we'll see you next time at Autism Live.
Bye.
Say howdy, we say hi. Let's get rowdy, let's get wild. Let's get wild.
Welcome back to Autism Live. As we mentioned at the top of the show, of course, and if you've been watching the news at all, you know that there's been a horrifying development in the case of the young boy, Terry Dwayne Smith Jr., known to his family as Juju, who went missing on Saturday night. There have been lots of different reports about what actually happened. My understanding from the most recent reports that his mom and her partner were out for the evening, and they left the 16-year-old who has been reported as his half-brother, but that is in question at this point in time, whether they're actually related. But they left the 16-year-old in charge of the 11-year-old. The 16-year-old said that the last time he saw him, he had gone to a store. The 11-year-old had followed him, and he told him to go home. The mom reported that she got home at about 1 a.m. in the morning, that she looked into his bedroom and thought that she saw him in his bed and didn't realize he was missing until Sunday morning. And there were hundreds, if not thousands, of people who volunteered to go and search for this young boy. They searched for him for several days in intensive heat, and of course concern was growing. There was a break in the story on Wednesday morning at 1 a.m. The sheriff department received information, and based on that they went to the home, cordoned off an area, and began digging for what they said they were looking for was human remains. Unfortunately, they did find human remains. The assumption is that the remains are of Terry Dwayne Smith Jr., known as Juju. Our understanding is that a 16-year-old family member, they're not disclosing if it's the same 16-year-old that was charged with taking care of him, but a 16-year-old has been arrested for murder. And of course, the whole thing is very upsetting. We certainly don't know the whole story. We don't even have confirmation that the remains are the boy, but the assumption is there that they are. So disturbing on so many different levels. And of course, you know, when these things happen, there's certainly a lot of rush to judgment about a lot of different things. It's easy to do. But in the course of all this, too, apparently the dad, who is no longer with the mom, has had some things to say in the media, and that is his right to also say those things. He has said that it is his belief that the child does not actually have an autism diagnosis, that it might be more ADHD. And my understanding, and it was reported last night on our local news, that the school district had disagreements with the mom about what the diagnosis of the child was. In the midst of all that, I thought the most horrific thing that could, on top of all of this, right, is if this is not bad enough, but while they were still searching for the boy, in the midst of searching for a missing child reported to have autism, they interviewed a supposed former teacher of Terry Dwayne Jr. Smith, and she was on camera with a microphone in her face, and she said, "I know people will be shocked to hear this, but he didn't really have autism." And my husband and I saw that and were so instantly and immediately offended. I have no idea what authority that woman, and again, allegedly, what it said on the news was a former teacher. I don't know if she was a former teacher, like a substitute teacher who is out of a job now, because I hope that's the case. Because I have no idea. I don't know any teacher who would disclose a diagnosis in a public forum with a microphone in her face, but add to that a child is missing. I don't know who that person was, but I hope that if she is an employed teacher, that she is fired immediately. That is beyond the scope of what is. I'll tell you what, both my husband and I stood up when we saw this person say that, and I thought, what on earth? If that is the case, that it is a former teacher, it sheds a great deal of light on what this family has had to go through, because I don't know any teacher who is empowered with being able to diagnose or empowered with being able to make public statements about somebody's diagnosis. The height of indiscretion, the height of being unprofessional, and in that moment, good heavens, if that woman is hired by someone, I hope that her school district will fire her immediately. Talk about insensitive, for heaven's sake. And as if that's something that's an appropriate conversation, even if it was legally possible for her to comment, but it isn't. So I was absolutely appalled, on top of everything else and what that family must be going through and what led to that, for somebody to make that comment to a news reporter with some supposed authority. Shocking to me. In any case, we will continue to monitor what happens in this story. A tragedy, a child is lost, and clearly, the support was not there for this family. We'll find out more about it, and we'll be reporting to you, but a true tragedy. And I hope that we all include this family and this child in our prayers. We are going to take a break. And when we come back, we are going to have Julie Cornack with us, and she is going to talk with us very plainly about some of the legislation that is changing here in California, because our hope is to get help and support to children who need it, regardless of what their diagnosis is or may be, and to families, because this does affect families in a grave way. Stick with us.
Hi guys, welcome back. For the month of July, I figured we're going to do something again that's more for outdoorsiness, since it's summertime and I know your kids are going to be home and you need some activities to do inside and outside. So for July, I figured we'd make a lantern. So let's get started. The materials you'll be needing are wax paper, an iron, crayons, scissors, popsicle sticks, pencil sharpener, a glue gun, and tape. What I did first is that I have my iron heating on medium heat, okay? Make sure you keep this far away from your child because I won't want them to get hurt. Next thing I want to do is I'm going to take my wax paper and I'm going to make 4 sheets. I'm going to cut out a thing that's about 12 inches long, okay? Now that I have my wax papers cut out, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my crayons, and if you have kids around, which I hope you do, I'm going to grab them and have them make some crayon shavings. What the shavings are going to end up doing is making it a design. And again, this is another time for you and your child to talk about colors. You can discuss like what would happen if you mix, some blue crayons and some yellow crayons. What would that produce? When you and your child have finally decided there's enough crayon shavings on your wax paper, what you're going to do next is you're going to take it and fold it in half. Now that I have it folded in half, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take an old newspaper and then I'm going to sandwich it in between. And then with my iron on medium heat, I'm just going to have it gently on there just so the wax melts into the paper and becomes one thing. Let's take a peek inside. And as you can see, all the crayons have melted into it, making this beautiful kind of like rainbow-ish color. All right, now I'm going to do this with the other 3 that I've made, and then we're going to assemble our beautiful lantern. All right? So here are my 4 finished panels that I'm ready to build into the lantern. So what I'm going to do is I have these popsicle sticks, and I'm going to build them into a square and glue them together with my hot glue gun. While you're building your lantern, it's a good opportunity to work on math skills with your child. You could discuss how many sides does a square have versus how many sides does a cube have. Okay, I'm going to do this another 3 more times, so I have one for every single side. Alright, well, now that I have these 4 different sides built, I am now going to take these wax paper things that I built, and then I'm going to put glue on here and smash it on there, okay? I know the wax paper is way too big for it, but what we're going to do later is trim it. Alright, so now they're all done being glued together. Now I'm going to take my scissors and trim along the outside. Now that the 4 sides are done, I'm going to take some tape and I'm going to line the edge of it so they will stay together to make my cube form. And voila, here's my lantern, but it's missing something. You're right, it's missing a light to illuminate it. So what I'm going to put in here is an LED light. I'm definitely not going to put a real candle or else the thing's going to catch on fire, and that is a real safety hazard, okay? So here's my little guy, and I'm going to turn it on and let's see what happens. Ooh, look at that. Isn't that pretty nice? And it's not even dark yet. I would love if you shared your pictures of your finished crafts. But until then, craft on. Bye, guys.
Can you see me flying by your side?
Am I looking at you? Or?
Welcome back to Autism Live. I've got Julie Kornack here with us, and we've rushed her in here because we needed, we asked her to come a little bit early. We rushed her in here. And you are a policy analyst.
Yes, public policy analyst.
And which means that you can translate for us, for those of us who are not, I always say I'm not a political animal unless I have to be. And then I need somebody to help me along, right?
I think if you're in the autism community, you have to be a political animal.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is what I have to be. This is what I have to, but I need somebody to walk me through and help me to understand, because a lot of information came out right before I left for a couple of weeks, and I've been asking other people and saying, okay, somebody explain this to me, and I'm getting different stories across the board.
Yeah.
So a couple of things have happened. Let's kind of back up a little bit, and we've had this budget,
yes,
and the state has been in crisis for a while. We got insurance reform.
Right.
That was going to help. Because before insurance reform in the state of California, the regional centers were granting money for ABA for families such as myself.
The regional centers were funding ABA for children who were severe, not necessarily high-functioning children with autism.
Okay. And certainly when we started, my son fit in that category. And because of ABA, my son got to a point where he didn't need ABA anymore and was on the high-functioning. I mean, you know, quite the success story for the regional center. And we always thank the regional center, because if it had been left in my bank account, there wouldn't have been any therapy.
Sure.
So, you know, very grateful to the regional center, but more and more people, as the incidence of autism was going through the roof, more and more people were petitioning to the regional center, and the state ran out of money. Not just because of autism, because of energy and a million other things, but the state ran out of money. So insurance reform gets passed, and we all think, hallelujah, this is going to be a great savings, except that a lot of people still didn't qualify for insurance. And even for the people who did qualify for insurance, there's a copay and or a deductible.
Right. Well, there's 3 things. There's a deductible, and there's a copay, and sometimes there's co-insurance, which means that after you pay your office visit copay and you pay your deductible, which could be as high as $10,000 in a year, you're also going to have to pay a percentage of the cost of that office visit. Most people don't experience co-insurance and ABA, but that definitely is something that's been an issue for families who have that kind of policy.
Okay, so here you are, you're a family, and you go, yay, there's insurance reform, so my child is going to be able to get ABA.
Yes.
And you discover that you have a $10 copay for every visit.
If you're lucky, you have a $10 copay. Right. A lot of individuals have $30 copays, and they're paying a $30 copay every day.
Right, and I was just going to say, so, you know, it could be that, you know, I was thinking about for us when we had therapy, there were days when we had 3 different therapists come. So I could be paying $30, I could be paying $90 a day for that therapy that's coming.
Right.
Or I might have a $5,000 or a $10,000 deductible that I have to pay $5,000 or $10,000 or whatever the number is before my insurance kicks in.
Right.
To pay anything. And I don't know about, you know, I think I'm preaching to the choir here that most autism families, you don't have $5,000 to $10,000 laying around unaccounted for, where you're like, well, we have that in case of. I wish we all did, but chances are we don't. I don't think many Americans have that. And by the time your child got a diagnosis, if you had that, it's gone.
You're absolutely right.
Wiped it out.
You're absolutely right. In this economy, people do not have an extra $5,000 or $10,000 lying around, whether they have a child with disabilities or not.
And then to have it every year, every January, that's going to, you know, you might eke through and figure out a way and hold a fundraiser and make it happen for this year.
Right.
And then you get to next January and you got to find that money again. And as my mother always said, it doesn't grow on trees.
It doesn't grow on trees. So let's talk about some of the things that happened with the new law as of July 1st.
Yeah.
Most families have probably not had an impact from it yet. If you're getting copays from regional centers, you're the ones who, if you're getting any kind of support in terms of funding from regional centers for copays, then you should listen up, because the new law as of July 1st that was signed into law by Governor Brown, was proposed by Governor Brown, says that the regional centers cannot pay deductibles anymore, and they can only pay your copay if you are at a certain income level, which is 400% of the federal poverty level, which is about, I think it's about $92,000 a year for a family of 4. I think, you know, most people know that doesn't go very far, especially in California.
Yeah.
So adding another $1,000 a month for copays is really not feasible for people.
So, you know, here's my problem with all of this, is that I feel like we kind of got sold a bill of goods, that we were moving in a direction, and because we keep saying we want to help more families.
Yes.
And yet we keep running into these obstacles where we think we've moved forward, and then we find that we really have not. So a lot of families, it's being reported that there are families that $1,000 copay a month has made it so that they can no longer have therapy.
Yeah.
Or the $5,000 deductible means that they're not going to be eligible to get $100,000 worth of therapy throughout the year because they just don't have it. And we're seeing families stop therapy as a result of...
Or cut back on therapy, which makes it ineffective a lot of the time.
An inefficient prescription.
Yeah.
If you've been asked to do 30 hours of ABA and instead you're going to cut back to 10...
Well, it's like taking pills for, let's say you have a strep throat diagnosis, and you take 2 pills a day instead of 4. You're never going to get rid of your strep throat.
Right. Devastating. So where are we going from here with this particular part of the law? Because there's another part of it that we have to talk about, the healthy families.
Yes.
What can we do to let our legislators know that this is not okay?
Right.
And what are we going to do to change it?
So the first thing that I think it's important to know, because the relationship that you have with your regional center, the notices that you might receive from your regional center might make you feel that you're in a fight with your regional center. And while you have to challenge what the regional center tries to do if you're not happy with the changes that they make, the regional centers vigorously opposed this law. They absolutely wanted nothing to do with any kind of a means testing.
That's good to know.
And they firmly are on the side of their consumers in this case. They believe that the Lanterman Act created an entitlement. They're correct in believing that the Lanterman Act created an entitlement, and the entitlement is not an income-based entitlement. It states if you're developmentally disabled, you have a right to certain things to be able to keep you in the community and not institutionalized.
Yeah.
So you're not at war with your regional center, but you are going to have to, those are the people who you're going to challenge if they give you any kind of a notice saying that they're not going to pay your copays. So if they are currently paying your copays and you get a notice saying that they're not, it should be a notice of action, just the way they would send you a notice for any kind of a change to your IPP.
Okay.
Then you need to challenge it, just the way you would challenge them if they tried to take away your ABA.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that people don't know that you can challenge the regional center. That you know, the regional center will make a recommendation, and then you can ask for a meeting, and you can appeal it.
Ask for a fair hearing, and you can appeal it. And while you're appealing it, they should keep your services in place. That's actually typically what happens. And the appeal process can take a long time, especially if a lot of people appeal this decision. Some regional centers don't think that this law is going to result in a lot of changes, but I don't understand that take on it.
I had just said to Julie that, you know, we hadn't had an IPP in 2 years because I'm bad, and my son didn't need it.
Yeah.
You know, but we had an IPP just last week. week, and I was talking to regional center people, and I said, I'm so concerned about this, and they didn't seem to be as concerned as I was. They said, well, you know, it does mean that we're not going to pay the deductible, but, you know, with the copay, it's just going to be families will have to prove that they have financial need, and there didn't seem to be the level of concern that I was feeling. But I think it's because it hasn't actually happened
They may not
yet.
have their marching orders yet.
Yeah.
And I think also that if you were waiting to hear from DDS, the regional centers want something in writing from DDS telling them this is how you're going to implement this policy. They're not going to implement the policy without getting specific directions from DDS. Nobody at the regional center is eager to implement the policy.
Okay.
So that's good news.
So we can kind of slow the process down a little bit. Like, you know how when other people gum up the works for us and they like take the paperwork and they move it slowly from one pile to another, we can be doing that to this process by appealing it, asking for a fair hearing.
Absolutely.
And while you're doing that, hopefully your services will continue while we all figure out a way to fight it and change it.
So the biggest thing I think we need to do is write to your assembly members and your state senators and tell them how bad this law is for you, because I don't think that our state representatives are trying to deprive people of autism services. I really think that they don't understand what the impact of this will be. And even if they do understand and something terrible has gone wrong here, we need to make sure that they know that this is a large group of people and a loud group of people. And send your letters. Send your letters to your representatives. I know we say that a lot, but it makes a difference. You need to be heard.
It does. And I think, you know, we get into a place where, and we were reporting about writing and calling and saying things about this before it happened. But I think we were all in this place of, well, they're not going to do that. They're not going to do that. They can't do that to us. They wouldn't do that to us.
Yeah.
And then they did. So we need to get on our game and make sure that we're calling and putting pressure on and showing up.
Yeah,
it's hard.
This needs to be an issue that we vote on. You know, if your state senator and your assembly member don't represent you the way you want, you need to tell them. You won't be voting for them.
Yeah, but they do hear what we say. We hear all the time that when people call, they make the little hash marks, and then they report back to the people and say, oh, we had a bunch of people call and say this.
Yeah.
And they
well, not only that, a lot of these senators and assembly members have Twitter accounts now, and I've tweeted them, and I get responses. So I think that that's another effective way. If you're savvy, you're out there doing your social media stuff, get on your Twitter and post about it.
You know, there is a thing that we all talk about in the autism community, that the autism community has not gotten really active on Twitter.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I don't know what it is about, and I'm included in that I do the Twitter thing, but I don't do it well. And I don't know what it is. It's not reinforcing enough to those. And I keep saying we're going to get a Twitter expert in here to show us how we're going to get a result from the Twitter. But maybe that's key. Maybe it's time that the autism community step up and tweets.
Yes, time to tweet.
It's time to tweet.
And it will be gratifying when a senator responds to you. So
yes, I guess maybe that, because I've tried the phone, the old-fashioned phone, and I'm not getting anywhere, Julie. Okay, so there's a whole other side to this, and you were quoted in the LA Times this last Sunday. We talked about that on Monday, that there was an article about families, real families, that there was a fund that was available for families that had income at a certain level that demonstrated that they need extra support. And when insurance happened, we were all promised that as that went away, there would be something to take its place. And now we've arrived at this place. There's nothing to take its place, and families are losing therapy.
Yeah, Governor Brown's made some really questionable decisions. If I look at it, everything that Governor Brown does, he's trying to be fiscally responsible. That's his mantra. But really, I don't think that his decisions are fiscally responsible. I think that they demonstrate a lack of understanding.
And explain that, because once you explain it, it's very clear.
So we originally had Healthy Families, which is part of a federally funded program that funds 2/3 of every dollar spent. And Governor Brown got rid of Healthy Families to move families into Medi-Cal. And nobody lost their coverage in that sense. They went from Healthy Families to Medi-Cal. And the savings to the state, from Governor Brown's perspective, was that the Medi-Cal providers were paid at a much lower rate than the Healthy Family providers. So he believed this huge $78 million savings was going to manifest itself from this. And usually his projections about what we're going to save are off, and I'm sure
and
they
it
were
was
off.
this time. The LA Times reported that it's been severely off.
Yeah, and the other problem is that because Medi-Cal providers, people who take, the healthcare practitioners who take care of people who have Medi-Cal insurance get paid at such a low rate. They can only have a portion of their practice take care of Medi-Cal insured and Medi-Cal beneficiaries, because otherwise they'll go broke. They can't have, half of their practice getting paid at this really low rate. So that creates a huge lack of access for people who have Medi-Cal, because the doctors aren't taking new patients. They can't afford to. So the other thing is that Medi-Cal is funded at about 50 cents on the dollar so 50 cents is federal, 50 cents comes from the state fund for every dollar. And so we go from getting the federal government to fund 2/3 to getting the government to fund half. So I don't get the good decision making there.
And then do they cover ABA?
The other thing is they don't cover ABA. So even though everyone who was in healthy families was promised that they wouldn't lose their ABA services, and this was something that advocates fought to hear, and they heard it, you're not going to lose your ABA, we'll make sure we fund it. They're losing their ABA. So as soon
Which is unconscionable.
Yeah.
Because when you think about it from a fiscally responsible place, if I understand people go, well, we have to be fiscally responsible. Yes. But if you're going to spend $10 today to save yourself $100,000 down the road, that's fiscally responsible.
Exactly. And there's no long-term view in this decision making. Yeah. Not only that, I think it's important for families when they contact their state senators and their assembly members, make sure that you talk about that ABA has an end to it. A lot of people have misunderstood ABA treatment, and they think that families are asking for 20 years of $60,000 a year of treatment. And they're like, well, that's just undoable. Of course we can't do that. It's not sustainable. So if you try to convey that this is a 2 or 3 year initial investment, and then maybe we'll have some targeted treatment after that, depending on the severity of the autism diagnosis, you're definitely going to be informing your legislatures about stuff that they don't understand right now.
Yeah. When I think about my son got ABA for 5 years, which I think is a little remarkable. Yeah. I think most kids it's 3 to 4 years. But in the first year, I think we were over $100,000 that was funded, which is remarkable. Yeah. We came in at a time before everything happened, fiscally, all that slide right before. And then each year it went down to, I think the last year it was probably around $15,000 that was spent. But if you added it all up together, you've got less than, it was probably $350,000 that was spent on my son. And I don't think that that's a small amount of money. I really don't at all. But when you consider that if they had not done that, the cost that was projected for taking care of my son across his life was in the several $million.
It's 10 times that amount.
Yes.
It's about $3.2 million.
Yeah. So when you compare, okay, they spent $300 and change to make a productive member of society who will one day work for NASA and find solutions to things, or they could have spent over $3 million to eventually have him institutionalized.
To house him.
Where's the fiscal responsibility and where is the moral responsibility?
Right.
And, to me, there's no comparison, but I don't think that the average person understands that because it's not an emotional issue for them. They don't have the faces in front of them, and that's our job.
Right.
We need to get our faces in front of them and say, here's my kid, here's what my kid is entitled to.
It's like any issue, you need to humanize it.
Absolutely. And now we're not talking about the $300,000 anymore. For the vast majority of the kids, we're talking about a much smaller portion of that for the deductible or for the copay.
Yes. And
it's
that's
the
other thing. We finally have insurance companies participating in this.
Yeah.
And so maybe we're talking about an out-of-pocket maximum of $10,000 for a child that we would have the regional centers fund.
Yeah.
And then the insurance companies are on the hook. Instead, they're keeping the insurance companies from having to pay for this.
Yes. And I think that's the key point.
We have an industry here, the insurance industry. In 2009, when the American economy was on its knees, the insurance industry, the profits in the insurance industry increased 30%. at the worst point in our economic, situation here, and in the middle of the collapse. So this industry, it's very powerful. But it's probably been a little bit successful here in depriving people of the access to the services that they need.
Yes, and I always refer to Dr. Seuss at these points in life because, that's where I go. And if someone like you doesn't care a whole awful lot, then nothing's going to change. It's not. It comes back to us. If we don't make a big enough stink about it, and I mean in a very peaceable way, using our voices, having a voice for our children who don't have a voice, voting with our dollars and voting with our mouth, and getting on the phone and working the Twitter and working the Facebook, and holding people accountable for their actions.
We have to take advantage of the sad statistic of autism prevalence. If we have a growing prevalence rate, more and more, very few people don't know someone who's been affected by autism.
Right.
And it's time to talk to each other and make sure everybody understands the issues and get everybody involved and very active and give them very specific things to do. So that's why I know I'm saying the same thing over and over again, but send emails to your senators, send emails to your assembly members, and don't stop, because this is they need to think of the autism community as, those people vote, they're very active.
Those people are loud.
Yeah, we're not going to mess with them.
Right.
That's a big group. We don't want to mess with them.
And if you've been entrenched in autism and, you've been busy and you don't know who your state senator is, you don't know who your assembly member is, don't, beat yourself up about that. Go to Autism Votes, put in your zip code. It'll tell you. It'll give you their phone numbers. It'll give you their email addresses. It might even give their Twitter accounts by now. I'm not sure. And they'll also help you to format a letter if you don't have time. So they make it really easy for you. Go to Autism Votes.
It's a great resource.
It is a great resource. But I would tell you also, Autism Moms are big on Facebook. We may not do Twitter, but we do Facebook. And I would tell you to go on Facebook, and when you post whatever, if you do it through Autism Votes, they'll give you a way that you can share it on your Facebook as well. Get your family members and friends who maybe don't have a child with autism, get them involved too, because that's really what the key is.
Absolutely.
As you were saying.
Absolutely.
Julie, thank you. I'm so glad
My
that you could
pleasure.
shed light on it. I wish that you could shed light on it and make it sound prettier than it is, because it sounds bleak to me.
I think the important thing is don't stop fighting, especially if you're a regional center consumer who is getting any kind of copay funding right now, any kind of help with your deductible right now. And it's going to be a challenge for you to pay those things, then you need to take advantage of all of the laws that are already in place to protect you, and don't stop fighting. If you give into it, that if it's easy for them to take something away from you, they're going to take it away.
So appeal and ask for a fair hearing and drag the paperwork as slow as you can.
And write your assembly members and write your state senators. I don't actually think there's a point in writing Governor Brown. So
that's unfortunate. But say, speak up, identify yourself, say, I'm somebody who's losing services, and we'll all rally behind you. Email me or put it on our Facebook, say, I'm somebody who's losing services, because we'll point people to that and say, look, Alice Brown is losing services. That's her kid. See that face, support them.
They need to hear the stories. They need to hear your personal story.
Okay. Thank you so much. We
My
appreciate
pleasure.
you so
Thanks
much.
for having
It's good
me.
to have a good brain that we can call on
anytime
to explain. All right, we're going to take a break and go to the A Word. This is the ongoing documentary being made here at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, following a little boy who is benefiting from that ABA therapy. So take a look. This is the A Word. When we come back, Angela Persicke is going to be joining us. We're going to answer that question about, is speech therapy effective in conjunction with ABA for our kids with autism? Stick with us.
Nick was diagnosed with autism in 1994 at the age of 4. He received 5 years of therapy from CARD that eventually faded out. Nick recovered from autism in 2001.
The song I'm about to perform is by the Red Hot Chili Peppers. CARD helped many patients, myself, to recover to this level now.
Cheryl and Mike's son, Jack Riley, was diagnosed with autism in 2010 at age 2. He's been receiving therapy from CARD for a year and a half. Today, Cheryl, Mike, and Nick meet for the first time.
I'm curious as to what you remember.
I certainly remember pretty long sessions, and I'd be frustrated if I would make mistakes. I mean, I remember one time I had to count a row of 6 blocks, kept messing up. That was really difficult.
Oh, I need it.
No.
I need it. I need it.
At what point do you recall hearing the word autism?
I was able to figure out what I was going through without anybody having to tell me.
Our concern is if it's a big secret to hide. I don't know what we can say.
No one ever told you, you just discerned
But the
it?
reason I'm comfortable talking about this is because I felt it. In therapy, I certainly began questioning why people reacted as they did based on what I said and did. Particularly because of difficulties I was facing in school. It got to a point where I wanted to understand why it was. So I entered while still going through therapy and still showing significant signs of the mental condition. Even after I'd improved to a significant extent, there were those who still gave me a hard time for it.
Did it hurt your feelings when you were in school, the way that kids...
Oh, absolutely, because it was bullying, it was harassment.
That scares us.
They called me names. I was basically, when it came to sports and PE, I was usually the last kid chosen.
Did teachers intervene?
Fortunately, not really. I mean, it was just so hard for me to talk about it because of how ashamed I felt. Certainly the first few years of elementary school, I don't think I really had the most supportive teachers. I mean, I remember my mom told me how my first grade teacher once said that she thought I had no chance of getting anywhere. And going away to college and out of state and being the only person for my old school district has made a difference. It's just really improved my social life tremendously because I got to be me, because with nobody knowing about my past, I wasn't faced with these misconceptions and prejudgments.
Do you tell people, new people that you meet?
No, that's not the first thing I will ever
No, I would
tell
hope it's not the
and
first thing.
You know what? In most cases, I never do, because while it's a part of my past, it doesn't define who I am. I mean, just thinking back to the very beginning, pretty much each episode, autism, what, not who.
I want to tell you right now, though, I'm so impressed with you.
Likewise.
I want you to know that.
Likewise. I mean, your son really inspires me just as much, because I'll tell you, anytime
I adore him, but I'd be lying if I said it wasn't challenging.
I mean,
it's cost me the stuff that like career things, goals. I don't care about those anymore. I work at night. I'm tending bar. Not that I'm too good for that. I'm just saying that's what I do. I want him to have a chance.
Right.
And you inspire me now.
Thank you. The feeling goes both ways. The feeling's mutual.
Before you leave today, we would like you to meet Jack.
I would love to.
This is Nick.
Hi, Nick.
Hey, Jack Riley.
All right, should we try this? I'm gonna try to take a picture of all of you. 1, 2, and 3.
Jack Riley, you rock.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm having a panicky moment because we have with us here Angela Persicke, who is a BCBA, a board-certified behavior analyst, and I specifically asked her to join us today to answer a specific question, and the person who asked the question, I said to them, we're going to be answering it at this time, and they just wrote me and said, I'm having trouble watching it, so I'm not sure that she's watching yet.
We'll wait.
So we'll wait for just a minute to make sure. I just emailed her back to say, you got to go to www.autism-live, but I can say that forever. And if she's not watching, she's not going to see that. Yeah. So I just emailed her.
Okay, no problem.
So we're going to hold off for just a couple of seconds on that. But I want to start by welcoming you and saying that it's such a pleasure to have you here because we haven't had you here for many weeks.
It's been a while, yes.
And then it was 4th of July on the day that you normally come. So I want to remind everybody that Angela is a BCBA, a board-certified behavior analyst, and she has great experience working with children on the autism spectrum, and you are also very involved with the Autism Research Group. Tell us what that is.
The Autism Research Group is a new nonprofit that some of my colleagues and I worked to develop here out of the Research and Development Department at CARD. And it is a nonprofit, and we're dedicated to research on topics that people need right now, that they're interested right now. Treatment for the behavior problems, the feeding problems, the different social skills deficits and cognitive deficits that you see in your children, help for families, and giving them the support and the resources they need. That our goal right now is to just help people where they're at and with the problems they're having now. A lot of autism research is focused on causes or different brain mechanisms or biological tracers, genetic tracers, all these things they're focused on, and that is all great. It's great because that would be all, of course, wonderful if they were able to identify these things. But that doesn't help the families right now with what they need. And so Autism Research Group is dedicated to helping families now.
Yeah. And we should mention, too, that, research, ABA has been researched for many, many years and found to be effective with kids with autism at creating progress. But there is still ongoing research that's being done to make it more effective and more effective in different ways. And in amidst all that, sometimes you just have a behavioral issue that it's kicking your keister. Like, somebody will go in and they figure out what the function of the behavior is, and they try, and that's not working, and so they try something else. And for a family, it can be very frustrating sometimes. One of the cases that I think of that the Autism Research Group participated in, a family that the child was torturing the dog.
Yes.
And so figuring out exactly what we're going to do to make it for this family so that this dog and this child can be here together, and that it was an extensive process. We've talked with Dr. Jonathan Tarbox about that study before, and you guys can watch if you're interested in knowing what they did that was effective. But being able to take those case-by-case things, which then can be applied to so many other cases.
Exactly.
Really, really important stuff. So we applaud the Autism Research Group and your work with them. And we should mention that you guys hold surveys that you ask for opinions about things that people want to see research on.
Exactly. If you visit our website, www.autismresearchgroup.org, right there on the home page on the left-hand side, you'll see a box that discusses our parent survey and where to go to take that survey. And we ask about 10 questions only about what you need. What areas are you, do you really want us to research more? What problems are you having in your life that a lot of people just are hands in the air and can't figure out? Those are the areas that we're most interested in because they're most important to you.
Yes. So I think it's remarkable what you guys do. Now, I promised yesterday and today that we were going to have Angela come in today and answer a very specific question. We got a number of questions that came in about the effectiveness of speech therapy. And I think there are a lot of people that are out there that are a little confused because if you've got a child, you've got all these behaviors going on, and you've heard by this point, if you're watching the show, you know it's important for you to get ABA. And you go to your service provider and you talk about getting ABA, and you have to go through a process, and sometimes you have to fight for the ABA, but up front, usually they go, okay, so here's your speech and here's your OT. Now, and they think that you want to be happy and go away. And most of us take the speech and the OT because they're offering it, right? And then we get somewhere down the road where we started ABA and we're, driving to OT and we're driving to speech and we're driving home to do the ABA, and we're crazy people. And I think everybody crosses your mind, is this speech something that I really need? Is this working? And one person in particular wrote a very poignant question. She said, hello, I have a 4.5-year-old son who was diagnosed with ASD when he was 3. He is currently nonverbal in the sense that he has no functional words except I did it when he poops. I got to say that those are good functional words to have. He babbles. His receptive language is fairly good. He goes to an ABA-focused private school, which is amazing. Very few people have that, but does not get speech therapy as they don't believe in it. One neurologist told me that he needs speech therapy in addition, and the other neurologist told me that traditional speech therapy does not work with kids on the spectrum, that he should get verbal behavior therapy. I don't know what to do. Should I try to find a speech therapist? Should I rely on the school to do verbal behavior therapy? Not sure how much verbal behavior therapy they do. And thank you for answering the question. So I promised her that we were going to answer it today. Hopefully she's watching by now. And, you know, what do you have to say to this rather lengthy question?
Well, first, if we're just speaking to the general effectiveness of speech therapy, obviously it's very effective for speech problems. For, you know, especially you see in the typical population, many students start getting speech therapy at kindergarten even. And especially for speech impediments, things like stuttering, anything along those lines. And so, yes, it's very effective for speech problems. And also, of course, we have our children on the spectrum who could also have these speech problems.
Right.
So,
in addition to everything else that's going on.
Exactly. We can't exclude them from having speech problems just because they have autism.
But just to clarify, are we talking about the mechanics, like the way your tongue moves, the way it strikes your teeth, the way you form your lips, the way your mouth moves, the way you produce sound coming up through, that's what we're talking about.
Exactly. And that's the mechanics. So, and that's my second point, is that if your child currently has very little speech at all, very little verbal, vocal behavior, as was noted in this question, there is not necessarily a lot for the speech therapist to work with, unless your child is actually having difficulties producing sounds. If there are specific sounds that the child is having difficulty producing, a speech therapist can definitely help with this, with tongue placement. They also know which sounds produce vibrations in the throat compared to vibrations in the nose. Sounds and the mechanics of them, as we noted before, is very important. And so if there are problems with the production of sound, so if you're seeing that your child cannot say certain syllables or says them incorrectly a lot, that would make a lot of sense for speech therapy. But if your child has maybe only 10 words right now, what a speech therapist might do during a session might look very similar to what a behavior therapist might do, to try to use verbal behavior approaches and teach different labels, what we call tags, different mands, so like asking for things, and those sorts of things. So you have to talk to your, assess your child and your child's skills of where they're at right now, and determine, is this a production problem? Is this a problem with the mechanics? Or is this a problem where the child just isn't, you're not setting up the specific occasions to work with your child and shape those different speech, vocabulary, and words, especially functional speech. And most children growing up, and as they start to develop speech, social reinforcement is really does a lot to maintain that speech. So, a child says "mama" for the first time, and everybody just throws a party and gets really excited. And for a neurotypical child, this social reinforcement maintains a lot of these behaviors. But for a child with autism, social reinforcement doesn't necessarily, at first, until it's been conditioned, maintain these behaviors. And so until you get to the point where you can identify what reinforcers will work to help your child to produce the different words and speech sounds and putting words together, it might not be necessary to see a speech therapist. But I would recommend having the teacher or the BCBA, if there's a BCBA available, a supervisor on the case, have a team meeting with a speech therapist, because speech therapists do have a lot to offer about and can hear, a child's babbling, say, oh, this child isn't even producing these sounds.
Right, and I think that's just so key, what you just have been saying, because when you stop and think about it, a lot of our kids, when they think about how a baby comes out of the womb and they've got these gushy little cheeks and faces and stuff, and I always tell the joke that one of my best friends, when she came to see Jem on the day he was born, she held him and she said, "Say oscillating sprinkler," and we just laughed, right? But because a baby couldn't possibly say oscillating sprinkler, beside the fact that they don't have the wherewithal to say oscillating sprinkler, they don't have the musculature at that moment in time to make those sounds. And children begin to chew at a certain point. They get their teeth, and so they're strengthening those muscles. And then they start to babble, and they're strengthening those muscles, and eventually they say words, and we don't understand the words clearly. There is that phase when kids are little, when the child says something and we look to the parent, what did they say? Because we can't possibly understand it. The difficulty with our kids is if they don't build the musculature, and then we try to get them to say words, and we're trying to get that to be reinforcing, but they're a 4-year-old and they speak and say something to somebody and they don't understand them because the diction is bad. You're kind of dead in the water. So these things go hand in hand. So on the one hand, you have to do what's productive in the moment.
Exactly.
And you got to figure out your priorities about what you need to be working on. But on the other hand, you don't want to poo-poo the development of the mechanics, because it's going to help make those things reinforcing down the road.
Exactly. And a speech therapist can actually tell you developmentally which sounds are produced at what point of time, which ones come first, which ones come later, which ones are more difficult for most children. Like the TH sound is very difficult for a lot of children.
Jem is still working on it.
Yeah, that doesn't develop until much later sometimes. And what the speech therapist can help with is also informing therapy and saying, like, okay, you guys are trying to teach these words, but he obviously does not have the ability to even say these. So maybe start with these words. Start using some of these words, like the bus sound is a good one that happens really, really easily, and is easier to teach. And also for some of these things, they can tell you where sometimes it's helpful for a child you can take a child's hand in yours and then have put like your hand on it like this and then his hand on his throat and make the sound together so he can feel the vibration. And those things are things that I've learned from speech therapists. And if you're working collaboratively, that's when it's really, really helpful. But also remember that a lot of our children, we recommend for a lot of our children to have these 30-hour-a-week programs, which of course doesn't happen very often. And speech therapy usually only occurs about 20 minutes a week, sometimes up to an hour a week, sometimes a couple times a week. And that's not a lot of time for your child to work on these skills. And so it's important to carry some of these skills over to the therapy setting and to discuss with a speech therapist what is going on in both locations so the child has more opportunities to practice.
And I think, too, not all speech therapists, speech-language pathologists are created equally, and not all speech therapists are created equally. And they have different areas of... we have been very blessed in our time. I think we've had 4 different speech therapists since my son started, and they've all been really remarkable people who have a vast knowledge and work very behaviorally minded. The speech and language pathologist that he's had since he was a kindergartner has her own method that I keep saying to her she needs to come on the show and put out, because there's a book and there are tapes and everything. It's called Mortimer Mouth, and there are these stories. I am somebody, my degree was in theater, and so speech was something that I taught, speech and diction, voice and diction, at the college level. But to work with a 3-year-old who had lost all communication and had a pudgy little face, I mean, I couldn't get him. I can teach anybody to strengthen their diction and to reduce, a regionalism that they have or a dialect that they have, but not a child who doesn't have good expressive and receptive language, So I so appreciated these therapists, and I couldn't get my son to do any kind of a tongue twister. Well, this speech and language pathologist, she has this thing called Mortimer Mouth, and It's a whole thing, and I think Mortimer mouth sometimes is on your tongue, and so they take their tongue and they try to get Mortimer mouth to touch their nose, and they try to get Mortimer mouth to touch their chin, and they draw maps with their tongues. It's so clever and so inventive, but gets them exercising and strengthening those muscles.
That's great.
It is.
Yeah.
It really is very inventive and very reinforcing for the kids. She does great work. But you mentioned the TH sound, and he still, over the summer, he doesn't get speech over the summer. He doesn't need that much, but we have things to work on, and we're still strengthening the TH sound because it's there in some words and not in others. Spotty. I don't know why. But, so you really have to look at your individual situation. You have to look at where your child is, what kind of speech and language pathologist you have. I'm a little disappointed that the ABA private school doesn't believe in any speech therapy. But I'm wondering if they're including the mechanics in something else and they're just calling it something else.
They might. Usually, from my knowledge, the verbal behavior approach does not necessarily include the mechanics of it. It's very much teaching through consequences, through reinforcing consequences, and shaping procedures, the different, echoing, being able to imitate sounds, and then labeling, tax, and then requesting, which are mands, and then different other types of verbal behavior. And from my knowledge, they don't use that, but that school may be. But since they said that they don't believe in speech therapy, and maybe that the neurologist said that he doesn't think that it works for children on the spectrum.
I don't think it. Let's be clear. I don't think it works in terms of getting the child to speak, to access language.
And that goes back
to that's a different thing.
Yeah, it's a very different thing, and that goes back to what I said in the very beginning. If your child doesn't really have any babbling or any language or anything at all, you could get an assessment with a speech therapist, but there may be some motivational factors, and that's where we start to, if there isn't any speech production, there's not much for a speech therapist to work with.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but speech therapy definitely works for children on the spectrum.
Yes.
It does. It works for children on the spectrum. It's very important, like I said, to collaborate and both can inform each other. And also, a lot of speech therapists, sometimes they don't have a lot of experience working with children with autism.
That's true.
And so even getting a child with autism to comply within 30 minutes and be able to get these speech productions, and work with the child, it may be very difficult, and we're used to that all the time. We're used to working with the child in that way, so it's about helping each other and collaborating.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, too, I don't know where this person is writing in from, but if you're here in the United States and you are paying for the private school yourself, you still can petition your local school district to pay for the speech therapy. They probably have a speech therapist that your child could go to at a different time during the day, aside from I know families that do that they have their speech therapy paid through the school district. I think back to our first year of ABA when the school district had asked us to put my son in their preschool, and we opted out of that. He did ABA at home, but he did go, I think it was twice a week, over to the school for a half an hour each time for speech therapy, and he also did OT, and the school district paid for that. So know that if you're in the United States, I would at least pursue that and see, then you're going to see how good their speech therapist is, and you might say to yourself, this is not an effective use of my time. But really individual.
And again, too, it's about what your child needs right now.
Yeah.
If that is taking a lot of time away from ABA therapy that your child may need because of other issues that don't involve just speech, other problem behaviors or challenging behaviors, or functional skills, or even working on play and social skills and all these other more important, not more important, but very important things. And it is taking a lot of time to have to travel to go see the speech therapist, especially if they're requiring a couple times a week. Then look at what is important now.
Yeah.
So what do you need now? And we're we're advocates of, and the research shows that 30 hours a week of one-to-one ABA therapy is very important. And that's why, again, it's also, like I said earlier, it's important to incorporate what the speech therapist is doing into into teaching verbal behavior as well.
Yeah, and I love that you brought up the priorities again, because we all have, and it's individual. My priorities can't be your priorities. We all need to accept that, but you need to step back and look at it and go, okay, what's the most effective use of our time, as you said, right now? When we were doing the speech therapy and the OT over at the school, I had said, here are the hours that we're in therapy. If we can work it out around that, we'll do this. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. We were able to work it out, all to the benefit. Okay, we've got some questions that have come in. We're going to take a break. Hopefully we have answered your question, and if not, write in more. We're going to take a break and come back more with Angela Persicke, BCBA, after these messages.
Skills is an online program that provides assessment, curriculum, positive behavior support planning for challenging behavior, and progress tracking, and it does this all in one place. The skills assessment and curriculum addresses 8 areas of development, which even includes advanced higher level areas such as executive functions and cognition, which pretty much makes skills the only ABA-based set of curricula for teaching more complex skills, things like problem solving, planning, self-management, perspective taking, and even inferring and predicting others' private events. Skills is a 4-step system. Step 1 is to add the child to your account. Step 2 is to start assessment. The skills assessment is the only ABA-based assessment with psychometric research demonstrating the language subscale to have excellent reliability. Every area of human functioning and typical child development from infancy to adolescence was researched, making the skills assessment the most comprehensive of its kind in the world, and we're quite proud of that.
Skills is easy to use. Simply click Start Assessment and begin answering questions. Or simply type in a keyword, find specific activities to assess, and add activities to treatment. Step 3. Choose activities. Once you've completed the assessment, Skills selects from a pool of 4,000 activities categorized by age, level, and skill type to provide you with exactly those activities each child needs. Start by choosing a curriculum, then a lesson, and finally an activity. Click the information icon to view prerequisites, ages in which targets develop, examples, and IEP goals. Click the video icon to watch a short video. Once you've identified an activity you want to teach, adding activities to treatment is a snap. Step 4. Start treatment. Here you can access customizable activity lesson details, add your own customized targets and exemplars, and edit an activity status such as introducing or mastering it. You can even print handouts such as worksheets, tracking forms, visual aids, and other materials. Skills also offers multiple progress charts mapping curriculum progress, lesson progress, and cumulative number of activities and targets mastered over time. The Skills language curriculum is categorized by verbal behavior type so that users can identify progress for verbal operants, such as echoics, mans, tax, and interverbals.
Skills is one of the only programs that provides the ability to write behavior intervention plans, or BIPs, for challenging behavior.
With just a few clicks, the outline of the behavior intervention plan is written for you and ready to be printed and implemented.
You can learn more about Skills today and get started by visiting us at www.skillsforautism.com, or you can call us at 877-975-4559. Skills. Progress starts here.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We're here in the studio live with Angela Persicke. She is a BCBA, a board-certified behavior analyst with experience working with children on the autism spectrum. And she is also a member of the Autism Research Group, a wonderful organization that we hope you'll go to their website and fill out a survey. Tell them what kinds of things you want to hear research about. We were talking before the break about speech therapy. You were answering a viewer question, and we had Mike Hipple, our friend Mike Hipple, wanted to weigh in on this. And he said, if I can add something, it is your right to have a speech therapist, which is a good point that, we didn't really mention. Thank you, Mike. Mike says, you need to ask yourself, if my child won't talk, what time should I stop trying to get them to speak and start with a communication device? Mike has been a wonderful addition to our show. He is a young man who just graduated from high school. Congratulations, Mike, and is getting ready to start high school. He uses a communication device. He's been a guest twice on the show, and he is a huge advocate input and talks about how important it is to give everyone a voice and to not, I know there's an emotional thing about you feel as though you're giving up when you put some sort of device in a child's hands to help them speak. We know that the research shows that's not the case. No. And as Mike has reminded us many times, it is super duper important in either case, if the child is going to eventually speak or isn't going to be able to produce sound, to give them a voice. And so, Mike, I appreciate your input always and respect it so much. And thank you for reminding us it is your right to get speech therapy.
And also, just to add to, that's something that our goal is to have our children communicate with us. That's the communicate their needs and what their wants and just anything. And so giving them any type of communication device, even PECs or sign language. I know a lot of children are using iPads to talk for them, where they type in and it talks for them. Anything like that where they can communicate is always helpful, and it allows for another step of independence. Even though it is a device that they're using, they're still communicating. Yeah. And that's the most important part, and also that they're communicating in an appropriate way. Yeah. And of course, it's not necessarily there's not necessarily a point where you just give up, but I think having some of these aids in throughout, we use PECs with our children sometimes from the start of therapy, and those are our aids. But of course, we use them along with teaching verbal behavior as well, and teaching speech and language, and it's not necessarily a point where you give up, but if the speech is just not working, and teaching that is just not working, we want our kids to communicate the best way that they can. And so it's very important to include these devices and include these aids along with teaching speech.
Yes, absolutely. So again, thank you, Mike, and thank you, Angela, for summing that up for us. We had another question that came in, a very specific question that I'm showing right now on the site. A BCBA observed my son in pre-K classroom for only 1.5 hours for ABA. I don't think that's enough time to make an accurate assessment. Am I right? This was for ABA from the school district. They said he does not need ABA. I'm already paying for ABA from Kaiser in class, so I am confused. All right. I know we both have opinions here. You're the expert. I'm the emotional person. I'm going to let you go first.
Well, I have worked with other colleagues who have specifically been board-certified behavior analysts for school districts. They're spread really thin, and they often have large caseloads and multiple people. They sometimes have one BCBA for the entire district, if they have a BCBA at all. So already these people are spread really thin. And when they're asked to observe a child, they have very limited time because they probably have to do 8 other observations the same day. But we, as behavior analysts, are instructed, and ethically we should observe the child over multiple environments and multiple days to make sure that we are actually observing what is true and what is accurate. So that is part of what is in our guidelines to do. Before we make any decisions, we need to make multiple observations across days and times.
And we don't know,
settings.
for the 1.5 hours, we don't know if they came in 4 different times for 15 minutes, whatever, and they came in on different days at different times, because you didn't write us that specific, and maybe you don't even know. Maybe they just said they were there for an hour and a half, and it may have been that they were there, on multiple days at different times.
And that's definitely possible.
That's a question question to have answered immediately?
So definitely talk to the BCBA or the teacher and ask those questions, and also ask what specifically they were observing, like what behaviors they were looking for or not looking for, and also if they were looking for specific behaviors or if the problem is something else, if it's skill deficits, were those skills even targeted during that those observation periods? Those are things you have to look for. So there are a lot of questions that you can ask, and the behavior analyst should be able to meet with the team, with the teacher. Hopefully, if you request this, we'll be able to meet and discuss why those decisions were made. And as behavior analysts, we're very data driven, and so for most of the time, we will have data showing why we made a decision or why we decided to go with one option over another. You might want to look at your child's case in general and what your child's needs are. And if your child is in a general education classroom, has no assistance, and has friends, doesn't have a lot of problems at home, can communicate with others, that's at the point where we're like, okay, maybe the services aren't necessary anymore. But to terminate services for one reason or another has to be very well defined. So that's something to ask too if the BCBA or someone else is recommending to terminate services. Ask why, and also if you have concerns about your child, that's the perfect time to present those. So these are my concerns. How will my child get the intervention necessary for these concerns?
Yeah, and I think that's all great advice, and I'm just going to add to it a little bit because I have a bunch of questions about. It was she wrote in, or he or she wrote in and said it was just a 1 day of observation. So I'm gonna suggest to you that you got a little bit of a fight on your hands here, but it's one that you have the great potential to win. I will say, as a parent, not as an expert, but as a parent with some experience with these kinds of things, because I think Angela is a very nice, responsible person, and she's not going to say these things, but that doesn't sound right to me. That's not somebody doing an efficient job, and it might be a fishing expedition to see whether you know what you're doing. Because schools will, not all administrators will try to get away with what they can get away with because they wait to see who's the squeaky wheel, who's going to push the buttons, who's got their ducks in a row. I hate that because it suggests that we don't have an even playing field, but guess what? That's the reality. So, my thing to you, I'm gonna start by saying you catch more flies with honey than you do with vinegar, so keep everything as nice as you can, but get your paper trail in order. And I would start with an email saying, a very nice email saying, it appears that you only did this observation on 1 day, and it's my understanding that in order to get a really good gauge on things, you would have to see my child in multiple settings across multiple days. And send that off. Make sure that you do it in an email, and make sure you save all the emails someplace that your computer can't get rid of them, right? Yes. Because you're going to mount your paperwork and your data. And then my next question is it because they were doing an IEP because your child is getting ready to go to kindergarten, or is your child still going to be in pre-K? And do they actually have ABA services at that school? Are they saying no to something because they can't give it to you anyway and they don't want to pay for it at home? Or are you looking, because it makes a difference in how they're paying for stuff. If they don't already have the ABA to give you, then they'd have to pay out of pocket. It's much more expensive for them. So all questions that I have for you, but we had Mike Dorsey on the show, and we need to have Mike Dorsey back again. As a just mental note to myself, time to have Dr. Mike Dorsey with us. But He's amazing, and he is an expert at placement for school settings. And one of the things that he said that I get chills every time I think about it, because I was like, oh, that's so good. He said when you're dealing with a school district, one of the first things that he goes in and asks, and sometimes he's hired by a school district to testify in court and say, here's an appropriate placement for the child. Sometimes he's hired by the parents to come in and say what the school is offering is not an appropriate setting. But the first thing that he goes in and does that we can all do is say, can I have an accounting of what my child is doing every 20 minutes and which IEP goal is being served during that 20 minutes? So you could also write in and say, forgive me, but I don't think that this is appropriate because you didn't see my child across settings and across days. And can you tell me during the period of time that the teacher was there what they were working on and which IEP goals they were working on? Because you're going to have them over a barrel. If they were in an hour and a half, how many different IEP goals were they going to work on? And if you have 20 IEP goals and they only worked on 2, then clearly she didn't assess, or he or she did not assess properly, right?
Yes, and like I said, we're trained to collect a lot of data. That's what we do, and BCBA should have that, so ask for that too. So what data did you collect while you were there observing? What were you looking for exactly? What IEP goals did my child demonstrate? Because that would be probably news to anybody if your child's doing everything right during class, during a 1.5 hour observation. So definitely exactly what you said.
And that's
questions.
Short game. That's short game. Now the longer game, because then you're going to get a response back, and they're either going to get defensive, or they're going to say, "Oh, well, you know, whatever." She did really see him more than that, and they're going to scramble. But Dr. Dorsey said, I can tell how well they have it together when I ask for that 15-minute accounting, how quickly they can come back with it. Because if they can come back with it the same day, they're probably on it. It's probably a very reputable school district who knows what they're doing, and you look at them in a different light. But a lot of places don't have it together, and they have to scramble to paste something together, and then you're dealing with people who aren't really getting it done. But your long game, your argument here is, if you've already got a diagnosis and you're going through Kaiser, then I know you've got a diagnosis, because Kaiser won't pay for it if you don't have a diagnosis. If you've already got the diagnosis and they're saying he doesn't need the ABA, then my question is, what are they saying he does need? And then the question that you ask your school district is, can you show me scientific data that this other, ask them, so what are you offering instead? And then when they write back and say, well, we're offering this, show me the data of how you have, show me proof that this is appropriate, which means it's effective. There isn't any data. There is no data. Nobody can show you that, because nobody has anything other than ABA. So you got them in that moment. It might be a 2-day process. That might be a 6-month process. That might mean you have to lawyer up. So you have to kind of weigh, engage, and stay nice, and keep sending the email and pestering very nicely and saying, I'm so sorry to bother you with this, but my understanding is that you need to see my child across different settings. Keep it nice, but don't let up. You're in the right. They're not. And you will find people who just want to get it done the fast way. And if they can just get it the fast way, think about how many parents are out there that they come and do an 1.5-hour assessment and go, oh, your child doesn't need ABA. And then the parents go, oh, okay. Right? And unfortunately, there are people who think that that's okay. I don't. You don't. So let us know, but follow your paper trail.
And like you said, too, look at who is making, how they're making these recommendations, why they're making these recommendations. Do they even have a placement for the next year? And maybe that's why they're making the recommendation. But also, if you're getting services through Kaiser, ask about their policies as far as terminating.
She just wrote in and said he's already getting ABA from Kaiser at school. So my question is does that shift? Because sometimes if your child is 3 and you're in pre-K, it's paid for one way, and then when they're over 3, it moves. The school is supposed to pay for it. So this might be the school trying to get out of paying for it and forcing you to go to Kaiser for it. I wouldn't let up on the school.
No.
Because at 3, at least in the state of California, and I think in most states in the United States, at 3, the school is responsible. And eventually, Kaiser will push back and say, if it's in school, the school should be paying for it. So, and then you get caught between the two. But it really is the school's responsibility. If Kaiser says he needs it, and you've got the piece of paper where Kaiser says he needs it, you're just going to have to push the school. Yeah. And you've got what's right on your side because they haven't done their work right. And that's always disappointing and upsetting. And if I told you the number of buckets that I have filled with tears about why aren't people doing the right thing for my child? Why are they trying to screw my child out of what he needs? Who in their right mind does that, and how do they sleep at night? But the truth of the matter is that when they don't do their job right, I have learned to say thank you, because now I'm going to get what I need because you didn't do your job, and I am going to do my job. I get that. Get that girlfriend thing going on. So, if you're not going to do what's right, I am. And I don't even get upset anymore. When they blow it, I go, oh, look at that. All right, so when am I going to get what I need? Because what I need is this. So when is that going to happen? And I just smile through it. But I cried for many years when people would do things because I was so disheartened by it. But you don't need to be. Their mistake is your child's gain.
Exactly.
They'll end up getting what they need. Okay, we should take a short break, and then we're going to come back and continue on. But if there's more to the story, write in and tell us, because I get hepped up when we talk about this. All right, but it will turn out okay. It really will. So stick with us.
The Institute for Behavioral Training provides programs to educate students, parents, and professionals proven techniques using applied behavior analysis. Access online video lessons with IBT e-learning. Get one-on-one personalized instruction with IBT face-to-face training. Acquire professional guidance with IBT BCBA supervision. Develop professional growth with IBT continuing education courses. Get access to IBT services today. IBT, 360 degrees of ABA training.
Welcome back. We are here in the studio with our very special guest, Angela Persicke, and I'm having computer difficulties, so hopefully I'm going to fix that, so I'm going to be able to see if that parent writes in more. But in any case, and I can't see all of it, but I can see somebody wrote, "You go, girl." And that's what I have to say to you. We can all do that. This was not my intention in life. Can I pause for just a second to say that? I had a plan of who I was going to be and what kind of mom I was going to be, and there was no autism in that anywhere. I never saw that. I didn't think, and if you had said to me 10 years ago that I was going to be hosting a show about autism, I really would have told you that you had lost your mind completely. And if you would tell me that I would enjoy talking about battling with a school district and about getting what's right for children, I would have said, what? I used to teach, and I love teachers, and I think that there are so many great people who work in schools and in school systems, but we all know that there are people who are in schools and in classrooms who are placeholders, that are there. I don't get it, because if that's what you wanted to do, there are better jobs, easier jobs that pay better, that have better retirement plans. So I think that the people who are placeholders in classrooms and administrators are not the smartest people. And so you either meet the people who aren't smart or the people who are so passionate about helping our kids. It's the best of times, worst of times. And I hope and pray that we all run into those passionate people as much as possible, because they are angels who walk this earth, brilliant teachers and administrators who throw down for our kids, And I hope that you find those. My sense is that you have found somebody who's a placeholder, or somebody who's being pressured by somebody else to be a placeholder or to just do the financial thing that they want them to do. Because sometimes there are people who, they don't last long because they're asked to do things and eventually they say, I cannot do that. But in either case, we have our work to do. And if we keep our stomach linings firm, we can do it and help our kids, because there is progress to be had.
Yeah, it's about doing what's best for your child, and unfortunately that often comes with these battles. But it's all about doing what's best for your child, and your child your child needs people to do their jobs correctly too.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very clearly defined. We've talked before about IEPs, that our kids are entitled to, here in the United States, what we call FAPE, F-A-P-E, free, appropriate, public education. That is what they are all entitled to. And, I think when we first hear about it, we hear the free, and we hear the public, and we hear the education. But the most important word in there is appropriate. Yes. This is the word that everybody gets tripped up on, because the school does not owe you what's best. And for years, when we first started out fighting for ABA, and you would go into a IEP meeting and talk about how the Surgeon General said that the gold standard of treatment for autism is ABA, and the schools would say, we are not legally responsible for giving you the gold standard. Right? And that was the truth, and that was the law of the land. But the word is appropriate. And my question is, okay, if you're not going to do the gold standard, what do you have that's appropriate? In order to be appropriate, it has to be effective. It's built into IDEA and rights law that our children are expected to make progress. That's why they have IEPs, so that they can have a plan to make progress. So it's got to be appropriate. We must go into these IEP meetings and ask for what's appropriate. And we know, science has shown, that ABA is the only thing that gets results.
Yep.
So if they're saying no to the ABA, then what is their appropriate offer, and where is the science to back it up? And here is where we have them, ladies and gentlemen, because they have nothing. There is no study showing that any school made progress without using ABA. I mean, I'm not aware of anything. Are you aware of anything that shows that a school with a child with autism had made progress without ABA?
There is, if any, very little out there, but I have not seen anything out there.
Yeah, I'd love
for
to see
children with autism.
I'd love to see it, and and it was one of the first questions that I asked when we went into the first IEP meeting, because somebody gave me the secret and said, "Well, ask then where their science is," and that's when it got really, really quiet. But again, you have to, as we say, gird your loins, or we also talk about put on your Norma Ray, be nice, but let them know that you're not going to be one of those parents that goes, okay.
No.
Because unfortunately, and we hope that we reach those parents too, we need to get to the point where nobody says, okay. And then maybe they'll stop trying to give our kids things that aren't appropriate.
Exactly.
Oh, see, I got all hepped up again. In any case, we're almost out of time, but one of our topics this week that we promised that we were going to talk about was cognitive skills and how we build cognitive skills, and especially over the summer, some things that we could be doing to build cognitive skills to help get our kids ready for the fall. Now, we've had a lot of people who've written in and said, but isn't that for older kids? It doesn't have to be, right? There's things that we can do with much younger kids for cognitive skills.
And when we talk about cognitive skills, we're pretty much talking about perspective taking another's perspective into account, and another person's thoughts and feelings, and using those to adjust and change your own behavior in regard to them. So there are some very basic perspective-taking strategies that you could use. So starting when a child is probably under 3. This is a lot of times when they just start talking, you're going to see these sensory perspective-taking skills. So from being able to determine what I see is different from what you see.
Yeah.
And if you don't see it, then I can't talk about it in the same way. And also what you hear is different from what I hear. If I say, do you hear this? But they're in my headphones, and or start talking inappropriately about, this song right now is so great, I love it. Of course, the person not listening to the headphones will not be able to hear it. And starting to work with some of those things, and I believe you've talked about this before, the barrier games, where you put up a barrier and you have one person sitting on one side and another person sitting on the other, and you first show both items and then you put them down and you say, okay, so what can you see? All right, what can your friends see? Why can't you see it? Why can't your friends see what you see? And starting with those really basic steps, and also what we want to do with that sometimes for sensory perspective taking is also start shaping this behavior of noticing that when someone is making eye contact or looking at something, they're probably thinking about it. So if I'm looking at a dog over here, you ask, oh, what was he looking at? What is he probably thinking about? Oh, the dog, because he's looking at it. And so starting with those very basic things, this starts very young. Very young. And
there's some great apps for that too that have cartoons. I know when Ashley Colas was with us, we talked about one app called the Social Express that has a lot of cartoons that, it shows these very cartoony characters they look like they're tweens or teens and looking at something, and then a bubble appears before their over their head that shows that they're thinking about the thing. And sometimes that's really effective for our kids to be able to see, oh, she's looking at the glass of tea, she's thinking about it. We love, movies are great because they'll do the close-up, right? Or they'll show the gun and then they show the close-up of the person and they're looking at the gun. I mean, that's not a great example. We're hopefully not watching gun things with kids, but you know what I mean. And we were instructed whenever watching something to be, getting in Jem's ear and saying, what's she thinking about? What did she look at and what she's thinking about? And we loved to watch American Idol and turn the sound down and say, somebody'd sing and looking at all of the body language. So sounds off, we're not hearing them, but did that judge like it? What's the singer feeling like? What's she thinking about? What do you think? Does it seem like they really liked the way they sang? And very interesting kinds of games that we can play that make it fun for kids to start to look at things and infer.
Exactly. And those thought bubbles are so great for even more complex skills where you have the cartoon saying something and then thinking something different. So when we get into where what people say isn't necessarily what they think, oh, I love that shirt, and then you have them thinking oh, I would never wear that, something like that. Exactly. Or even we have this great cartoon where it's a picture of a younger boy, and he's there's another, a couple boys around him, and he's oh, spiders are so cool, and then he's thinking, spiders are so scary, I want to run away. So having those visuals is really helpful for our kids, too, for understanding that people don't always say what they mean and what they're thinking, and to start thinking about, oh, how are they saying it? Are they saying it in a happy tone of voice? Or are they saying it more in a scared tone of voice? And identifying those non-vocal cues, too. Are they frowning while they're saying, no, I'm okay, I'm feeling okay today, but are they frowning? So how might they really feel if they're frowning?
Absolutely.
So different things like that are really, really fun to work with, and you can do that just in your conversation when you're watching TV, watching cartoons, anything like that.
We've had some response, and I can't see all of it because my screen has cut things off, but I think I'm getting the gist here that the person wrote back and said that there's educational ABA, and Kaiser, I guess, provides the health ABA. So what I infer from that, because I can't see the whole thing that you wrote, is that part of what happens when your child reaches a certain age, and usually that's 3, your ABA is going to be split into a couple of different categories. It's going to split again later on, too. That your funding sources are going to pay for different things. For instance, for me, when I was at the regional center, when he was at school age, which was determined to be 3 in the state of California, he he got some of his ABA was provided by the regional center, and that was for home skills, for adaptive skills, for things that he did at home. But for educational issues, the ABA that would have been provided for educational issues was to be paid for by the school district, either while he was in school, or if they couldn't provide the services, they had to pay for it when we were at home, and they did pay for a portion of our ABA at home, our school district. So that's how it, because you have educational goals and then you have life skills goals, your adaptive goals and things that happen, your social goals are going to be in both. But obviously, if somebody is paying for what you're referring to as your health ABA, your adaptive and life skills ABA, they don't want to be paying for stuff when you're working on stuff that should happen in a classroom, like counting. Now, there's wiggle room, and there are some things that fit in both things, but I think that's what you're describing, so that the Kaiser is asking that the school pay for the educational. But you're still in that realm of, okay, my child is entitled to the free appropriate public education. Where's your appropriate? Show me your appropriate. Show me that your methodology, your IEP cannot stipulate the methodology, but they have to show that it's effective. So ask them for studies at what are you offering? Because if they're saying your child doesn't need anything, based on an hour and a half that they observed one time, it's a mess.
Yeah, so and a lot of times the educational part of it is academics or challenging behavior within the classroom. But social skills should definitely be a part of that.
Yes.
So look at the IEP and separate the goals, and also look at, try to come up with your own assessment of how your child's doing and what skills that you think he or she has or does not have and still needs to work on, and see how those might be categorized as one or the other.
Yeah.
But social skills are really important in the school setting, because obviously you will not you might not have a lot of play dates at home.
While you're talking, I'm just going to interrupt. Emily's going to show some of the ways you can get in touch with us, because we're down to like a minute and a half here. So keep talking.
So I would, if all the academic skills are, if your child is meeting the IEP goals on those, then start discussing social skills and other classroom behaviors that will be important for the next year in the classroom.
And absolutely, part of your IEP, your child is entitled to making progress on educational goals, but included in that are occupational goals. And in order to succeed occupationally, our children have to succeed socially. So, but you're still in the same neighborhood of asking, all the things that we talked about still are going to be appropriate, but that's why those two things are separated, because your funding source is that. Now, tomorrow on the show, I have to say Dr. Adele Nadowski is going to be with us, and Dr. Jonathan Tarbox are going to be with us. So exciting show tomorrow. We have to say goodbye and thank you to Angela Persicke. Thank you so much for all that information today. Thank you to all of you. We appreciate your conversation. I hope you'll call your congressman and let him know that you want ABA for your kids, whatever state you're in. We'll be back tomorrow. Until then, please give your kiddos a hug from me. Bye-bye for now.